Well, thank you all very much for warm welcome. This really session is what the conference is all about, going from opposition to government. How do we sell conservative philosophy to the electorate? How do we educate Canadians on the evils of not following this pathway? And whether you're in workshops on campaigning, or in workshops in educating the public, or in how we get conservative thinkers elected all across this country, I think this is probably the reason why we are all here for these few days. I'm delighted to host this session. I want to, the format will be, we'll hear from each of the three leaders. James Bailey, I guess, has a strike on back in Nova Scotia, and I don't know who's on strike there. I never had those kinds of things with the public sector, but apparently in Nova Scotia they do. So we have three leaders from the provincial front lines with us today. I'm going to call them up one at a time. They each have about 10 minutes. Tell us what's going on, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion, and we have an opportunity for a bit of a Q&A as well, if there are questions from any of you to any of our provincial leaders. I can remember my time as a leader of the opposition, and what a challenge it is to keep caucus and party united, to keep the focus on what we want to talk about without the resources of government to get to talk about what they want to talk about. And there are many interesting challenges that are very difficult to manage, and particularly for the leader of the opposition. And we have three good ones today that we want to hear from, and hopefully you will agree with me when this session is over, we will want to support for their ideas as back to their respective provinces. Now, I'm also very cognizant that I am the only thing, or at least the four of us are the only thing between you and the Sussex Strategy Group Hospitality Suite. So I will bear that in mind, and we will finish this session on time. And for our friends at Sussex Strategy, I hope you got lots of sustenance available to us all. We've had a long day. With that in mind, I'm going to start by introducing first Brian Pallister. Brian is the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba. He has a wealth of political experience at both the provincial and at the federal level. A cabinet minister in the government of Gary Filmon until 1997. He was also the three-term member of Parliament for Portage-Lisgar, serving as the chair of the House of Commons Finance Committee and the parliamentary secretary of the Ministers of International Trade and International Cooperation. Since 2012, he has served Manitobans as leader of the opposition. He tells me his golf game has suffered immeasurably since taking on that role. I understand that as well. It's actually easier to get out and golf when you're premier than it is in opposition. With those remarks, please welcome first Brian Pallister.
Let's congratulate Michael Harris again for his tremendous work and contribution to the country of Canada and the province of Ontario. I want to say it's an incredible honor to have the chance to address the gathering today, and I want to thank Preston for the kind invitation and say that he's given me somewhat difficult task. He asked me to do two things on the conference call. He said 10 minutes on Manitoba and keep it positive. I can't really, and it's an unfortunate reality of opposition politics, that sometimes the things that are best for you are worse for the people of your jurisdiction, and that's certainly true in Manitoba. The NDP have governed Manitoba since 1999, and they have governed badly. They have been the recipients of a perfect storm of opportunity. Record increases in transfer support from other provinces and the federal government, solid revenue growth, record low debt service charges. This would be the trifecta of opportunity for any good management team to improve the jurisdiction they were governing, but the financially strong payoff for the people of Manitoba has simply not materialized. Instead, through a combination of through-the-roof spending and new borrowing, the NDP has squandered that opportunity and doubled our provincial debt in that time period. Now, since the former finance minister, Greg Selinger, succeeded Gary Doer, the NDP has gone further, and they have added new taxes, new fees to the mix, and they are living up to the honorific, the SpendEP. Now, in 2011, the NDP were re-elected to their 4th term on the promise that they would not increase taxes. Read my lips, he said. And weeks later, they raised taxes. They raised taxes on everything from haircuts to home insurance, car registration, benefits packages. It was the largest increase since Howard Pauley was the premier 25 years before. And you have to understand, this was just weeks after they promised not to. That's just un-Manitoban. Last year, the NDP added an additional 1% to the PST, the only province to raise the PST, moving it 60% above the rate of our better-governed neighbours to the west and the south. And to do this, what they did was they ignored the referendum requirement of Manitoba's Balanced Budget and Taxpayer Protection Act, which I'm proud to say I drafted as a private member, and which became our law. They ignored those provisions, and they eliminated the right for Manitobans to vote on that tax increase and gave it to themselves. 37 Manitobans got to decide. 1 million Manitobans did not. Now, the effects of these measures by the NDP have been predictable. Taking approximately $1,600 off every kitchen table in the province has reduced the discretionary incomes of Manitobans. And what that means is that our middle class, lower class family, lower income families are suffering as a consequence disproportionately. So what you're seeing in Manitoba is food bank usage is up, top in Canada. Cross-border shopping is up. Inflation is up. #1 in Canada over the last year, double the national rate, and that hurts seniors. Out-migration of our people is up. We've lost 50,000 people from 2000 to 2012 to out-migration interprovincially alone. Conversely, job creation in Manitoba is, I told you it was depressing. Conversely, job creation is down. We have lost jobs over the last year. Over 7,000 fewer people are working. Wage growth is stagnant, and we have small business confidence at almost non-existent levels. In fact, CFIB just released a report a couple of weeks ago saying 76% of Manitobans would not recommend starting a small business in Manitoba. So, what's happened? Well, the NDP has sold their integrity for 1%. They've sold Manitobans on broken promises. They've sold Manitobans down the river, and the reality is that they're now trying to convince Manitobans that it's a good idea for Manitobans to be lied to and to pay higher taxes and fees. And it's not working. So this has the NDP in a box. They're promising that they're going to spend the money now on infrastructure, and that's a very interesting promise because, first of all, there's only been one department of government over the last 4 years since Mr. Selinger became premier that has not overspent. One department, and that department would be infrastructure. Not a little bit underspent, 27% underspent. So of every $4 promised for roads, bridges, sewer, water projects, less than 3 were actually invested. So where did it all go? Somewhere else. Another higher priority. Secondly, the NDP's ideological animosity to the private sector means that you're not going to see 3P partnerships on the horizon very soon in our province. So there's only one place. There's only one dance partner left, and that partner's across the street over there. And that partner has a Building Canada fund, and that's good. But the reality is the NDP have made a habit out of Fed bashing. A lot in private, but more lately in public. Thomas Mulcair hugging is frequently in evidence in our province. However, Thomas Mulcair came to our province during the federal by-elections and promised to do for Canada what Greg Sellinger's doing for Manitoba, and that didn't work very well in the by-elections. In fact, those results showed about a 70% decline in NDP support in Manitoba. So Thomas Mulcair probably has reflected somewhat on the closeness of his relationship with the Manitoba NDP. But there it is. Now, what's the problem with all of this? It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to Manitobans. And to put a capper on it, there was a shuffle last fall, and our brand new finance minister came down here to Meech, met with all the finance ministers from your fine provinces across the country wearing burlap and carrying a tin cup and shaking it like this and saying that we need more, like Oliver in the movie. We need more money. We need more. The record recipients of transfer payments need more. Manitobans don't like to hear that. But they even went further. The NDP has now said that, and they're on record on this, and some of you are aware of this, they now say that Statistics Canada cannot count, and that actually Statistics Canada missed counting 18,000 people in Manitoba. So they really need more money yet. Now, ironically, StatsCan was accurate in 9 other provinces and the territories. It was just Manitoba that they can't count people in. Now, this beggar thy neighbor tin cup approach means that Manitoba's NDP is actually biting the hand that has fed them generously for a long time, and that hand belongs to the rest of Canada. We don't think that cuts it. Yet none of this is new. None of what I've told you is new. This is the NDP tactic in our province and many of yours as well. They pretend that they can run social programs. They equate spending more to caring, but they do not concern themselves sufficiently with getting results. Now, there's a danger in all of this, the political danger. This being said, current polls have us significantly in the lead, but polls are a dangerous distraction at best, and they're a contributor to complacency at worst. So I am urging all of you here, if you have the slightest interest in being part of what could be the most important ascent of a Conservative Party in this country currently, with due respect to my colleagues who will speak later, then I urge you to contribute your time and effort and support to us, and I would like your help. I am so proud of the work this organization does and the work many others do and many of you do in making democracy work. And I am tired of hearing people say democracy doesn't work. Their frustration with the conduct of some elected officials causes people to become cynical sometimes. But democracy is not supposed to work. We're supposed to work at democracy. Democracy is not an escalator. It's a hill to be climbed. And I want you to know that in our province, our caucus and our committed volunteers are dedicated to keeping our eye on the ball. And we are doing the door-to-door work that needs to be done. Because as my old dad used to say, business should go where it's wanted, and we want your business. So we're going to the doors to get it. Conversely, the NDP is so tired they actually introduced a vote tax subsidy to pay themselves $1 million before the next election for doing absolutely nothing. It was my proudest day as the leader of our party when we met as a caucus, and to a person we said, on principle, we will not accept a penny of the subsidy offered to us from people who do not wish to support us. We will earn our support on the basis of merit. I like working, and I like working with people who like working, and work we must. We have a lot of work to do. The advantages of incumbent governments are many, and Manitoba's NDP are aggressive. They are the last of the NDP governments in this country, and they are dedicated to preserving their species from extinction. And they will use their powers to fight extinction at all costs. Taxpayer-paid attack ads are running right now. That's easy. It's easy to attack me. they're using a picture of me that isn't very good. There isn't one that is good, so it's simple. Disingenuous mail campaigns, blatant misinformation, scaring seniors, frightening civil servants. This is the whole thing. The beauty of our situation in Manitoba is we know the NDP will mislead people about us. We just have to tell the truth about them. We have some disadvantages. We have some profoundly important advantages as well. Our people are hardworking, dedicated, principled people. We are enthusiastic. We care about the future and we focus on it. We are not in it for the power. We're in it for the chance to use the tools of government to better the province we all love. And I feel with kindred spirits today that that is why we are involved in politics. It is to make a difference, and we will make a difference. I got into politics because my town was dying. Back in 1992, I brought forward a bill that caused us to balance our books, that had penalties for cabinet ministers if we didn't. And I'm proud of that. The NDP has torn that up and thrown it away, but we'll bring it back. I got involved in federal politics because I don't believe in monopoly governments, and I wanted to see Conservatives all across the country, by whatever name their party was at the time, come together and unite to be a national power again. And my wife Esther and I went back to Manitoba to renew our relationships with our family and with our friends. And I've been sucked back into politics again because I still think it makes a difference. Don't you? I'll just finish by saying thank you. I hope you all get as much out of this meeting as I'm getting. And I want to tell you that I truly believe that Manitoba is a have province with a have-not government. And we'll change that. Do I stay up here, Mike?
Yeah. Thanks very much, Brian. I, as chair of this panel, have to stay nonpartisan, and so I can't say that that NDP government sounds like a Liberal government of Ontario, so I won't say it. You didn't hear me say it. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear from Danielle Smith, and it's a pleasure to introduce the head of Alberta's Conservative opposition, the Wildrose leader in Alberta. Prior to entering politics, Danielle was the Director of Provincial Affairs for Alberta with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, working with all levels of government to represent the interests of the Federation's 10,000 small business members in Alberta. She was also a regular Conservative voice in the Calgary Herald, serving as both an editorial writer and columnist for 6 years. So please join me in welcoming Danielle Smith.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I can be partisan, and that NDP government in Manitoba kind of sounds like the progressive Conservative government in Alberta. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Conservatives. It's a pleasure for me to be here this afternoon to speak to you about my home province of Alberta, Canada's energy superpower and economic engine. Now, I recognize that for most of you outside of Alberta, you might have some trouble understanding Alberta's unique political environment. To them, Alberta is a Conservative heartland. We led the charge for an elected Senate. We were the birthplace of the Reform Party. We already have a progressive Conservative provincial government. So why did we need to create another Conservative provincial political party? Well, I'm hopefully going to try to explain that to you. I know that to other provinces, Alberta looks like it has all of the advantages. We have a high standard of living. We've got strong employment, a growing economy, a net population increase year over year, an educated workforce, an enviable natural resource environment, which includes major oil and gas reserves, among other things. Alberta collects more revenue per capita through taxes than any other jurisdiction in Canada, and we generate billions of dollars through non-renewable resource revenues. However, despite all of these excellent advantages and a booming economy, all isn't well on the Western Front. Our province is currently running its 6th consecutive budgetary deficit. After being debt-free for more than a decade, Alberta once again owes money to the bank. In the boom times, we saved nearly $17 billion in a rainy day fund. That money is now nearly all gone, and our current debt now stands at more than $8 billion, according to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. And this begs an important question. If even the wealthiest province in one of the wealthiest countries in the world can't make its ends meet, is there any hope for any other province who don't have some of Alberta's incredible advantages? So what does this say about Alberta's fiscal management, and more specifically about our ability to make choices, to live within our means, responsibly? Now, you all know that Alberta is a province of farmers and ranchers. Our agricultural sectors are a major part of our economy, and they employ thousands of Albertans. The Calgary Stampede is an annual testament to that heritage. But we're also a province of artists and engineers, of entrepreneurs and philanthropists, of scientists and tradespeople. What brings all of these different groups together and binds us in a common purpose is what some have called the spirit of Alberta, an unshakable belief that the hard problems can be solved, that tough challenges can be overcome, and that the bigger the mountain, the clearer the skies at the top. And that brings me back to our wealthy province and our seeming inability to balance the books and make ends meet. Each province faces its own unique set of challenges, but there are some common issues which we're all in the same boat. Healthcare, of course. The healthcare system now consumes more than 40% of Alberta's $40 billion annual budget. Annual increases in healthcare spending, which dramatically exceed the rate of economic growth, are simply no longer sustainable. And in Alberta, at least, we have proven that spending more money isn't necessarily effective in producing the kind of outcomes our citizens expect from a publicly funded healthcare system. An aging population has resulted in dramatically higher costs for providing care to Alberta seniors. Alberta's ongoing economic growth and population increases have also created substantial demand for new infrastructure, for new schools, for new hospitals, for new roads, all of which comes at a cost to provincial coffers. The last 15 years as well have also been tumultuous for Alberta's major industry. The period from 1998 to 2008 saw 10 years of almost uninterrupted growth. The value of all oil and gas produced in Canada, most of it in Alberta, was more than $26 billion in 1998. Driven by higher commodity prices and production, though, by 2008, the high water mark year, this sector had grown over 500% to $145 billion worth of value. But unfortunately, those days of strong and steady growth are long gone. In the past 5 years since 2008, it has been characterized by some of the most significant changes our industry has ever had to experience. There have been more changes to the industry in the past 5 years than in the previous 50 years. For a decade, Alberta was a natural gas province until prices collapsed. The good news is that the oil sands have grown enough to offset this collapse in natural gas prices, at least in terms of total revenue generated. The type of drilling we do in Alberta has also changed dramatically. Only 5 years ago, our industry was drilling 20,000 wells a year, mostly vertical wells, targeting natural gas. This year and next, we're going to drill half as many wells, but 3/4 of that are going to be targeting oil, and the wells are going to be drilled using horizontal and completed using multi-stage fracturing. The fact that we have been able to repurpose and keep on producing and growing our economy is a testament to the resiliency and adaptability of our industry. But that's Alberta, and that's Albertans. Responding to change as it happens and figuring out how to make money from whatever opportunity comes in the door. But regrettably, many of the drivers of our future growth and success now lie outside our borders. Without pipelines, Alberta faces a massive opportunity lost. Not a single day goes by that we don't read or hear about Alberta's what's become known as Alberta's plumbing problems in the news. There are 5 oil pipelines in play: Northern Gateway to the Pacific Coast, the Kinder Morgan expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline to Burnaby, Keystone XL to the Gulf Coast, the Energy East Pipeline, the project that will move Alberta crude all the way to St. John, New Brunswick, and what should be the simplest thing in the world, the re-reversal of Enbridge Line 9 from Sarnia to Montreal. And I'll just remind you that this last pipeline was constructed in the national interest in 1976 to ensure that Quebec was supplied with Western Canada crude oil. It was reversed to provide Sarnia with imported oil in 1998. And all we want to do is return it to its original configuration for the original reason. Hopefully that will happen soon. But even this small project has not been without controversy. Well, it is likely that one or more of these projects are going to succeed, and Enbridge Line 9 reversal as well as the Kinder Morgan expansion seem the easiest since they're going to employ existing rights of way and largely use the same infrastructure. There will be no measurable impact on the takeaway capacity of oil sands from Alberta until 2015 at the earliest. Even if all goes well, the Energy East pipeline won't move product until 2017. So your guess is as good as mine when U.S. President Barack Obama will approve or what he will do with Keystone XL. I suppose it depends on the advice he gets from his advisors, Robert Redford and Daryl Hannah and Neil Young. But while Alberta and BC appear to have made some sort of peace over the Northern Gateway issue, there's still also much work to do on this file as well. On the natural gas side, the plan is to export liquefied natural gas, LNG, to the Asian markets from the enormous gas deposits of Northwest Alberta and Northeast BC. There are currently 10 projects being proposed, but time is our enemy. As more natural gas is unlocked all over the world using new technologies, the global LNG business is becoming increasingly competitive. The one key disadvantage we have in Canada is the Canadian habit to study and discuss things forever in excruciating detail. And my big fear is that we will lose this opportunity if we take too long to get the approvals and get our product to market. Another challenge is that Canada is trying very hard to be responsible on a go-forward basis with our greenhouse gas emissions. We at the Wildrose firmly support all government and industry initiatives to be responsible in minimizing our total environmental footprint. But let's face it, our competitors around the world are nowhere near as committed nor subject to the same level of scrutiny as we are in Canada, and in particular Alberta, and in particular our oil sands. And now we also have a new internal threat. We have a leader of a certain federal political party musing about a federal carbon tax. I suppose we should be thankful he now at least has two policies. The Wildrose view is that there is far more to be gained from technology and innovation than punitive taxation. So we've got problems. The danger of a booming economy is thinking that the boom will last forever. In making the decision to go back into deficit and debt, Alberta is hoping that the good times are going to last long enough to ensure that we can climb out from under our debt before the economy slows and provincial revenues fall again. To me, this represents a gamble, a major one, in terms of our future economic prosperity and our ability to deliver key government programs and services in the long term. As conservatives, we oppose spending more than we can afford as a basic principle of good governance. And I think it's an attitude, more than anything, that must be maintained on the part of both government and its citizens to ensure our long-term fiscal success. We should never feel comfortable spending more than we take in. Even in times when running a deficit is unavoidable, it should still be unsettling for us to be sinking into red ink. We should feel some anxiety that we are limiting our future by spending today what should have been saved for tomorrow. My worry is that after 6 consecutive budget deficits, with our savings drained and no end of deficits in sight, that my province is about to cross the bridge where running deficits is just part of the world that we live in. And that's why Alberta has another Conservative Party. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Danielle. I'd now like to welcome Ontario's Leader of the Opposition, Tim Hudak, first elected. Where's the sign? Tim was first elected as the MPP for Niagara South in 1995. I remember that election. He served, he served in a number of cabinet positions, both under my administration and that of Premier Eves, including as the Minister of Consumer and Business Services. In June 2009, he became the 23rd leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party. He subsequently reduced the Liberals to a minority government in the 2011 election. Unfortunately, they found some allies to stay in power a little longer than we'd like, but I have to be nonpartisan, so I won't mention that. So let me move right away to say, Tim, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Please welcome Tim Hudak.
Well, thanks very much, Mike, for the very warm introduction. Friends, great to be back at the Manning Conference. Let me say this, too. It's a thrill to be up here with Mike Harris. This is a guy who, don't applaud yet because I'm just building towards it. You know, when you take on a new job, the best thing to do is go to somebody who's been in the big chair, done the job, and done it damn well. And I'm honored to have served in that cabinet and to stand on the stage tonight with one of the great premiers, the province of Ontario, Mike Harris. And before I do a little catch-up on the Ontario scene, I want to say one more word of thanks and gratitude. You know what? After Mike, one of the first people who reached out to me when I became Ontario PC leader back in 2009 was Preston Manning. And Preston has been an incredible source of advice to me, a mentor in so many ways. Give me advice on how to be a conservative leader, how to organize and focus a caucus, how to communicate a clear message. And one thing always striking too, he always started with personal. Asked how Debbie was doing, how my daughter Miller was, asked how I was doing and my team. A man of integrity, a gentleman, a great Canadian. And you look at the success of the Manning Centre and the conference here today, you look what Preston built. So to Preston Manning, my thanks, our thanks. Fantastic job. Well, as you've heard this afternoon, parts of our country are in serious trouble. In Ontario, for example, we abandoned the economic fundamentals that made Ontario a leader. Ontario's promise was that something we earned. It wasn't given to us. It was that if you wanted to work hard and get ahead, to start a business and see it succeed, there was no place anywhere else on the earth to do so than the great province of Ontario. We earned that through low taxes and hard work, a government that set priorities and spent within its means. That set up Ontario for success. And when Ontario succeeds, Canada succeeds. Our rising tide would lift all boats, and we're justifiably proud of that. And then 10 years ago, Ontario voted for a Liberal government, and they imported policies from elsewhere. They brought in a belief that you could spend your way at a deficit, that high taxes and big government were the new normal, the natural way of doing things, that expensive subsidies were the way to build government pet industries like industrial wind turbines and solar power. And now 10 years later, well, the results were predictable. Our debt has doubled. Our deficit is actually greater than all the other provinces' deficits combined. Our hydro rates have doubled. And we added on 300,000 more jobs to government bureaucracy while we shed 300,000 well-paying middle-class jobs in manufacturing. And then the human cost. So much young talent now leaves Ontario to head out west, to head south, to find their way forward, and then they stay there. And Ontario had always been a beacon around the world. They came from India, came from Slovakia, came from Brazil. You came to Ontario to get ahead. Now new Canadians increasingly going out west, I don't blame them, That's where the jobs were. But it should be Ontario. That's the consequence. And Ontario has now become a province of smaller dreams and bigger government. And so the place where your dreams are fulfilled. So clearly, this Liberal experiment has failed. And I plan to bring it to an end. So I put together a plan to determine how we'd get there step by step. You know, I've met with many of you folks here in this room. I visited Washington, D.C. to talk to some of the big thinkers and lawmakers. I toured the oil sands in Fort McMurray. I visited New York City to meet with the credit rating agencies that look at our numbers with clear-eyed objectivity. I flew to Vancouver to consult with the resource sector. And from all those meetings, all that advice, my team and I, we put together a series of papers called Path to Prosperity. Anywhere from affordable energy to better health care to how to create jobs, a new deal for the public sector. I'm proud of those plans. I'd encourage you to check them out at OntarioPC.com. Tell me what you think. There's no doubt we stimulated a lot of debate. I'm proud of that too. We brought forward bold new ideas like merit pay for teachers to improve the quality in our classroom. We introduced competition for public sector services. We said that government should get out of businesses where it doesn't belong and focus on the basics. And then we took some of those best ideas and we built a plan focused on jobs and the economy. I call it my Million Jobs Plan. It is a bold plan to create more jobs with better take-home pay, 1 million private sector jobs in the province of Ontario through affordable energy, lower taxes, and less debt. These are proven policies that have worked everywhere they're tried across the world. The kind of jobs they create, good, well-paying, steady jobs. The kind of jobs that you know if you work hard, you're going to have that income not just for a few weeks, but the next few years. So you can buy a home, pay the mortgage, set aside some money for tuition for your kids. The kind of good middle-class jobs that have been the source of strength for Ontario and always made us great. That's what I want to build. That's what I want to see. And look, I know there's some on the left, they say, there's no way you can create 1 million jobs. He just pulled that number out of the air. But I've been there before. I sat at the cabinet table, and I was proud to be part of the PC government from 95 to 2003 that saw 1.1 million new jobs created in our province. We can do it again. Now, Ontario's current premier, she calls it magical thinking. I call it ambitious. And it's doable. Step one, balance the books as quickly as you can. Stop running up the debt. I want to see a government in Ontario that spends within its means to protect the things that we care about. That's job number one. We'll then put lower taxes for all ahead of corporate giveaways for the well-connected and the select few. We'll bring back affordable energy to power our economy and help you pay your hydro bill and stop this madness when it comes to subsidies for wind and solar projects. We'll address our labor shortages by modernizing our labor laws and training more skilled workers. And I want to congratulate my colleagues out west in Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC. Some time ago, they signed the New West Trade Agreement, free trade among the provinces. Shocking, we actually have barriers among the provinces. They've done that out west. I'd sign that deal in a minute and get Ontario involved as well. And I'd put Ontario workers and businesses unshackled from all that red tape. I'd put them up against anybody, anywhere in the world, anytime. Ontario should use its weight, its muscle and confederation not to push for more handouts from Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC, or Newfoundland. They're making Ontario jokes in Newfoundland these days. We're a have-not province. We should use our weight in Confederation to push for more free trade deals for all provinces to succeed. I want to see more Ontario products loaded up on trucks, on boats, on the internet. I want to sell our products, put more made in Ontario products on the shelves across the world, across Canada. That'll create jobs, and Ontario always wins through free trade. Friends, it's those types of mainstream conservative principles that always made Ontario strong. So where do we stand today? As we head into March of 2014? Well, to be direct, the situation is grim. Ontario's in a mess. But my team, we've got a plan to put us on a course for a brighter future. More jobs with better take-home pay. And with a potential election this spring, I'm drawing on all that advice that Mike Harris and Preston Manning gave me. Those things I talked about earlier. Rewarding hard work, getting the fundamentals right, a focus. And tell you what, I'm looking forward to calling my friend Preston Manning to spread the word among all those Manning Centre supporters the day after the election to let them know that Ontario is back and we're stronger than ever. Thank you very much.
Great job, Tim.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to all three of our leaders. Let me ask the first question, and I'm assuming there's microphones there. If you have any questions you want to ask, think about those. Let me begin this discussion by saying all three of you mentioned deficits and debt as one of the barriers to growth in your provinces. We're here at the Manning Centre. The one man who deserves the most credit, there are a number of organizations, for making deficits an issue and understanding that these deficits lead eventually to higher taxes, that they lead to intergenerational debts for our kids, was Preston Manning.
That's right.
And I was fortunate in 1994, 1995, when we were making this case in Ontario, that generally more of the electorate understood that these ongoing deficits were a huge problem and needed to be fixed. And my solution was to fix them, and the voters bought into that, amongst other things. My concern is this. Three of you have mentioned in your provinces the debts, the deficits, they're building up, they're going, the spending is out of control. I agree with you. And yet I don't get the sense that the public has the same intensity, if you like, that they had back in the 90s of the evils of these deficits. And I'm interested in hearing from each of you, what are we going to do about it? How are you going to sell small c conservative philosophy to an electorate if they don't think it's a problem? Go ahead.
Well, I think people are starting to get it. In Manitoba, you remember in the old days when the baby was born, they would pick the baby up and give it a spank, and it would start to cry to clear its lungs. Manitoba doctors don't do that anymore. They just they lean over to the newborn, whisper in its ear, "You owe us $28,000," and the baby just starts crying. I stole Preston's old joke, you know.
It's a good one.
It's fundamental to I think draw the analogy to personal finance more often than we do, perhaps. You can't run a home by saying yes to the kids for everything they want. You can't run a business by saying yes to every request for spending. You can't run a government that way either. And I think we need to draw it, as much as possible, draw it back to the personal experience of the person we're talking to. Just as an example, a mortgage, a $300,000 mortgage, unheard of 25 years ago, but nowadays, $300,000 mortgage is pretty common. For a middle-class family in our province, to renew their mortgage at a 2% hike is about $9,000 before tax. $9,000 difference in that family to pay every year on their mortgage renewal. That brings it down to a point where people can understand it. In our province, we just went over $30 billion on our debt. Run the decimal point out a few times and figure out where we're going if we get a resurgence in interest rates back to even moderately in the direction of what we had to deal with, what you had to deal with, and others had to deal with back in the 90s. It's an incredible challenge, and the hole in Manitoba, and this is not a problem unique to Manitoba, is getting deeper all the time with the government we have, because they've never learned how to manage in tough times, because all they've had is double-digit bonuses every single year.
Danielle, Alberta?
Yeah.
I think in Alberta, we still at least have a consensus that debt is not a good thing. When you look at the polls about how they think the progressive conservatives are managing the economy and the budget, 2/3 of people think they're doing a terrible job because of this. They're just putting the hard sell on why it is we need to borrow. But it's not at this moment having a turn in public opinion, not yet. I mean, we'll battle that out in the next election. What we focus on is the opportunity cost of that debt. And I suppose in the early 1990s, we had come off double-digit interest rates. So there's a false economy here that we can afford to borrow this much money because interest rates are relatively low. But what happens when those bonds roll over and they're double the percentage points higher? That's when you start seeing those finance charges start eating into your operating spending. By the time we get to 2016, we'll have $600 million being wasted on finance charges, which goes to cutting into how much you can pay for teachers and nurses, for correctional officers, for beds in hospitals, and that's how we're trying to frame it. We think that if we lose this battle in Alberta, I just do not know how our Conservative friends in other provinces are going to be able to make the case against debt. So we're going to do our part.
We're cheering for you. Tim?
Yeah, I think Danielle raised a good point. I'll say to Brian, though, $30 billion deficit, they're amateurs. Wynne and McGuinty could do that in a couple of months. I think Danielle's point, I think too often as conservatives we focus too much on the math equations. You know, sometimes we a party of accountants, and my background's in economics, so they often say we're a lot like accountants just without their sparkling sense of humor. I get that.
I have an economics background too.
That explains a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah. But look, you know, we actually spend more on debt interest, money we've already borrowed and spent, than we do on our entire budget for community and social services. So imagine that there's, you know, some young man with a speech disability or a labor mobility challenge, and he wants to put his incredible talent and tenacity that he would have his whole life to try to overcome his challenges into the workplace. And he can't get that because we've already spent twice that budget on debt interest. Yeah. So every dollar that we've sacrificed because we didn't make the tough choices is robbing from people who want to contribute to our workforce. Mm-hmm. So I think we got to put it in human terms. Yeah. The other one too, for some of the young folks here in this room, the money that we borrow from China, from Americans and such, we got to pay that back. And then we pay it back with interest. So think of it this way too. What do they do with that money? They use it to build their own universities, their own subways, their own highways, to invest in research. So that when that young generation gets in the marketplace, they're going to have a heck of a time getting that good paying job because it's overseas. So that's the other threat. The deeper we are in debt, the more we're helping our competitors take the jobs away from the next generation. We put in those human terms, we connect with people, we win the election, and we put our books back into balance.
That's right.
Okay. Have we got, I see, hard for me to see there. Go ahead, right there.
Thank you. My question is for...
Just tell us who you are, too, and where you're from.
Peter Bradley, Ottawa Centre. Mr. Hudak, I like your ideas. You got great ideas. You said your white papers are causing discussion. I only have a bachelor's degree. I found your white papers difficult to read. Do you have any evidence that they are causing discussion amongst masses of voters, please?
You know, I wish I had the numbers off the top of my head. So look, do I think that everybody out there has got one of my white papers and they're reading through all 15 of them and all 300 pages? No, of course not. People will involve themselves in politics at various levels. I suspect many folks here in this room from Ontario have heard about our ideas, have looked through them. There'll be other levels that will engage during the campaign. But what we've been able to do is actually shift the debate, to put the focus back on jobs and the economy, to put the focus on our energy rates. We've had, I think, probably tens of thousands of downloads and paper copies beyond that. But look, I live in the real world. I know that's not going to be the reality for many voters. We'll all have stories, Brian, Danielle, Mike, and I, about knocking on doors with a week left in the campaign, lawn signs everywhere, TV and radio filled with ads, and somebody will say, what, there's a campaign on? Why did nobody tell me? What I'm doing now, though, is focusing down those plans into a succinct plan. You can't campaign on 300 ideas. You got to have the focus. Mind, jobs, and the economy. And I walked you through that today with my Million Jobs plan. Get taxes down, get debt down, energy rates under control, modernize our labor laws, and more trade. I'm convinced that'll get Ontario back on track.
Hello. My question is for Mr. Hudak. I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Alejandro Fisman. I'm 17, and I'm a student at Sir Robert Borden High School here in Ottawa. And I firsthand see the ineffectiveness of our education system in Ontario. And you know, as you may have heard in the past months, you know, there's been major complaints about the way we teach math in Ontario, and I really think it proves the fact that when you make a mistake, you know, at a very large scale, since many people use this public system, you really mess up a generation of people. And my question is, would you ever consider a voucher system that would increase competitiveness, increase the quality, and cost much less, also including the fact that you wouldn't have a large bureaucracy to set it up?
Good non-controversial question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I think it also appeals to voters since...
Why don't we ask all three?
Well, I think it also appeals to voters since, you know, lots of people care about, you know, their religion, and I see that in this current system, Catholics actually have an advantage in the sense that they have a board specifically set for them to embrace their values.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, well,
Okay, we got it.
I'll give a quick answer. I know my colleagues want to address this too, Alessandra. Look, you said you're 17, and you would have been 10. We had a pretty rough election here in Ontario on that topic. I've been clear, I'm not going down that path. I know that's maybe disappointment to some, but my focus is going to be on raising the bar in our public education system. And I think you hit the nail on the head, though. I want to see a greater emphasis on math. I want to see it on science. In fact, we propose to bring in a new test for science because Ontario is falling dramatically behind competing states and provinces and countries on science. And I also think we need to do more when it comes to the trades, skilled trades in our high schools, and financial literacy. Those will be my focuses in raising that.
Danielle?
Well, as you know, we need workers in Alberta, and this may be one of the reasons why you would want to come to Alberta, because we did successfully see these reforms in the Klein era, and I would hope that my colleagues on the stage might take a look at how Alberta was able to implement a modified voucher system and have some success. And the way they did it is they changed the funding model, where they divide up the grants on a per-student basis, and the funding follows the student to the school or the school board of parental choice. And we have two major public school boards that are funded, the public system and the Catholic system. There's charter schools which can get direct funding from the province. There's homeschooling, so parents have the ability to have a blended program or do 100% homeschooling. Even in the private school system, there's a 70% amount of the per-student grant that follows the student to the private school of parental choice as well. So I think that Alberta managed to find the right balance that supports a whole range of parental choice, and there's just one wonderful success story that comes from the innovation that has developed from this competitive environment. I was on the board of Weber Academy, which is a private school. I was also on the public school board, but the public school board kept seeing declining enrollment. And one of the things that they looked at was this very successful charter school called Foundations for the Future. It had established one campus, quickly grew to 4, had 4,000 kids on the waiting list because they were using a traditional learning model. Well, someone at the school board said, well, the only way we're going to be able to compete is if we offer a similar model. So now they've got their own traditional learning centers within the umbrella of the public system, and they teach 15,000 kids through that traditional learning model. So I have incredible support and very high praise for the approach that was taken in this modified voucher system. It's absolutely given parents choice, and I think it's developed some wonderful outcomes and improved our public system as well.
Brian?
I won't address the specifics of the question, but I will say this: it's been my experience that mathematical skill sets and the ability to understand fundamental principles of money management are pretty limited in the general populace. There's a low percentage of people could tell you the difference between a deficit and a debt. And part of the problem is government literacy on financial issues is not that high either. So what I've found in my experience is that Liberals and New Democrats are very good at subtracting opportunities and dividing hope, but Conservatives tend to be better at adding jobs and economic growth and multiplying opportunity. So I'd rather be a multiplier and an adder. And so that's what we're trying to do in Manitoba, while the NDP, the only thing they can add, frankly, in our province is debt.
Okay, I've got to allow a few minutes for some housekeeping announcements that need to be made. I committed to get you by 5 o'clock to the hospitality suite. Let me say one thing. The questioner talked about mathematics, and I can tell you there is a tremendous shortage of teachers qualified to teach mathematics in the country, and particularly in Ontario. And I would add this for any teachers that are out there: if you'd have spent half as much time fighting me, going back to school and learning mathematics so you could teach our kids better, we'd have a better country today. Now, but I don't want to be anyway. I'm just using my prerogative as chairman. Let me thank all three of our leaders. Let me wish you well, as we wish anybody across the country that is willing to stand up and fight for the small c conservative principles that built this country and will restore this country and your jurisdictions to the status that you all aspire to. We thank all three of you. Appreciate it very much. And that's the session.
Well, I'm not sure about you, but I enjoyed that a great deal. I also didn't expect Mike Harris to be nonpartisan today, so that's a new leaf we've turned over here at some point. Thank you very much to each and every one of our panel members. We greatly appreciate your time. You can only guess how hard it is to get these four people on the same stage at the same time. So let's give them one more round of applause, and thank you very much.